In this video, we're going to render some of your watch suggestions, so we'll see if any of you have that designer's touch. But first, let me give you a preview of my next G-Shock project. It begins with the blue GM2100 that we made an in-depth review a few months ago. I bought an aftermarket metal case and bracelet for the GWB5600. I got the newer generation that has a quick release spring bar, so I can use this bracelet to the GM2100. The last piece is coming in a few days, the silver GM2100 that I got at a really good price from a generous viewer. Thank you, Alan. As I wait for the final piece, I took the time to make a visual render of the idea. There will likely be some fitting issues, especially for the bracelet, but I'm hoping that the module swap would be very straightforward. So I took some stock images from Casio as they would likely have the same lighting composition. I swapped the case first for the silver 2100. Then I cut the dial on the blue variant and placed it on the composite image. After a few tweaks, I then add a little shadow behind this image to create a little more contrast and cheap 3D effect. I then repeat the same process for a front view to further show the details of the project. I'm very pleased with the outcome and I hope it will be as close to the real thing as possible. Some may ask, why didn't you use the Royal Oak mod instead? Well, I wanted this project to be as close as I could to what G-Shock would actually release themselves. Also, there is currently no bezel case available for the GM2100 and the current cases do not fit this metal Casio Oaks. And that's the project render. I asked you guys to name the project and I got a ton of suggestions. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in a name. I settled with MC's suggestion, The Manhattan. This is a reference to the comic book that I grew up with and that infamous project in World War II. Time for some viewer suggestions. I chose 3 great ideas for this video. First is the suggestion by Yuli Flume of a titanium 50 Fathoms on a bracelet with no date, no numerals, and contemporary hands. This render felt straightforward as well, as I was simply going to remove some details. However, the challenge came when it's time to replace the numerals. Blancpain obviously wanted to emphasize the quarter markers, so I needed to replace these numerals with something that will stand out, but will keep the spirit of the dial. I chose to render a double index setup to get this idea across. Then I pulled some more contemporary hands from a different model, cleaned up the dial shadows, and matched the color to the lume of the indexes. It has a more slimmed down impression now, but I feel that the rest of the bulky nature of this watch didn't match the dial. This is something that you miss with those bulky numerals. Next, Dominic had a simple idea of putting the 62 MAS dial on an Explorer case. You can ignore the fact that it won't fit this case, but it shouldn't be that hard to do. I added a pop of green on this dial to make it a little bit more interesting. Finally, the one I'm really excited at is Stavo's idea of the Ming tank hybrid. I had to plan this one out. I need to keep the tank's identity of dial and bracelet alignment. Both Ming and Cartier have strong crown profiles. And lastly, I needed to keep the softer corners of the tank but have that Ming flaring lugs. So I started with the lugs. To get that Ming shape, I had to duplicate the tank's corners and use those to curve out the lugs. I then added some grooves for visual interest. It's not completely the same angle as Ming would have it, but you could still see that it's a Ming. Next, I worked on removing some Cartier branding. These bridges should be as plain as could be, along with removing those blue hands. This will create the illusion that Ming got a hold of some Cartier movements and installed it in their case. Ming is known for their transparent dials, and this will be no exception. I traced the hour markers on this one and painted it on the dial. I like the segmented style that Ming employs for their watches. Making this a mix of strong lines and thin pointers really helps sell the idea of a square watch from this microbrand. And now the fun parts. I added a bold blue gradient over the glass along with Ming's clear open hands. Then the crown would go over the tank's cabochon and Ming's branding at 3. At this point, I wanted to experiment by extending the case sideways. This created a happy, unexpected accident. By duplicating the case sides, it created a pleasing line carving. I could have blended it out, but I love it so much and left it in. Lastly, I added a more lively strap collar, and there you have it. A glimpse of an alternate reality where Ming created a tank homage. I must admit, those are really fun ideas. So comment down below if you have any watch ideas and let's see if we can render them for the next episodes.